Welcome to the Australian Hiker Podcast, Australia's longest running hiking podcast, downloaded over 1.3 million times worldwide and providing you with an Australian perspective on all things hiking. We're your hosts, Tim and Jill Savage, coming to you from Gunditjmara country.
In today's episode 345 of the Australian Hiker Podcast, I'm going to bring you the first half of my adventure on the Great Southwest Walk in southern Victoria. We hope you enjoy. If you'd like to help support Australian Hiker and this podcast, there are a couple of ways that you can help us out. Firstly, by subscribing on your podcast host of choice so that each episode is available as soon as it's published. And if you have the opportunity, leave us a 5-star review. Another way to support us is go to the Australian Hiker website at www.australianhiker.com.au and click on the supporters page and buy us a coffee. You can do a one-off donation or become a monthly supporter. All donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue producing this podcast and blog. Now let's get on to today's episode. In this podcast episode, I'm going to bring you a series of recordings undertaken on my travel down to Victoria to commence my trip on the Great Southwest Walk, as well as recordings undertaken on the first 7 days on trail. This will include detail about what I'm seeing and also what issues I'm having along the way, and hopefully telling you how wonderful the weather is. In the lead up to this trip, I've had a few people who have done this trip recently who've said, look, it's a really good trip. You're really going to enjoy it. So just reinforces what's going to be going on. And hopefully, as I said, the weather will be good and I can get the best out of it. It's 9:20 on Friday, the 17th of April, and I'm here in my hotel room in Portland. Arrived roughly around about 7:20, and that was probably about 50 minutes longer than the trip should have taken. But that's the way it is when you're trying to wrangle various people and different forms of transport. Since I arrived, I've checked in, put all my bags in my room, and I went out and got a pizza for dinner. Late dinner for me, and normally I'll eat dinner at around about 6:30, but that is what it is. I'm now packed or opened up my main bag, ready to get packing tomorrow. And for me, tomorrow is a rest day. I think after 15 and a half hours on the road, and I've been up since 3 o'clock this morning, so I don't think I'll be out of bed for too much longer. The trip down was quite good. From Canberra to Melbourne, quite uneventful. Bus wasn't particularly full, probably only 10 to 12 people on the bus for the whole trip. Got into Melbourne to Southern Cross Station, probably around about 20 minutes late. Went to grab a quick lunch and went downstairs to the appropriate platform to wait for the train. One of the issues with the trains these days in Melbourne with free public transport, it ends up being that pretty much you can just walk on and don't have to do anything. And as a result, the train was overly full. Every seat on the train was taken, and pretty much there were people standing in the aisles on all the carriages all the way down through to the final stop of the train. They are doing work on a couple of the train stations at the moment, so it means that we had to change over to a coach earlier than is normal, and that was a bit of a nightmare. The bus that I was supposed to get on, in fact did get on, was the express bus, which pretty much took me to Warrnambool fairly quickly. There was also another Warrnambool bus that did a bit of a Cook's tour and stopped at a number of other places and took longer. And pretty much everyone targeted that bus to have a shorter possible trip as they could. It got to the stage where the person coordinating all the loading onto the bus said, look, we need 5 people to get off, just because we've got people that are going through to Mount Gambier and Portland, and we had to basically get these last of these people on the bus. Trip down to Warrnambool was pretty good, not a problem at all. Then we had probably a 40-minute wait, a bit longer than planned, until our bus arrived. And again, we got on reasonably quickly and had the trip down to Portland itself. So all up, apart from the bit of the rush and the confusion when we got off the train, everything worked out okay. I know coming back that the work on the train stations will be fixed. So really I've got a bus through to Warrnambool and then a train through to Melbourne. And my train through to Melbourne, I've actually got a booked seat. So it shouldn't be too much of an issue compared to the trip down. But overall, it was probably easier than I thought. And, it's a good system, works well. I'm glad I actually have a rest day scheduled for tomorrow. And in fact, I actually had 2 people on the bus on the trip down who were starting the Great South West Walk tomorrow. So I may see them at some stage. I may not. It just depends on how quickly they're travelling. And they're certainly a few years younger than me, so I wouldn't expect them to be travelling that slowly. So tomorrow what I'm going to end up doing is I'll have a good long sleep to make up for last night. I'll go through and wander around Portland to have a look, take some photos. I've never been here before, and I'm not likely to come back here again in a hurry. So what I'll end up doing is going up to the trailhead, finding out where that is, working out how long it's going to take me to get there on Sunday, and as I said, just wander around the town just to see what's here. It's a reasonably large town. I was talking to the person sitting next to me, and I asked how big Portland was, and she said there was a population of roughly around about 10,000 people. So, it's a reasonable size. And they've got a McDonald's, so it must be a big country town. As I mentioned, tomorrow we'll be going through and getting my pack all sorted. So pretty much it'll be, as I said, on Sunday I'm planning on a 7:30 leaving time. So it means that really all I need to do is walk over to the start of the trail, which is just over the train tracks, and then I can start walking from there on. Okay, I think it's time for bed, and I will talk to you tomorrow. It's Saturday night, the day before I start my journey on the Great South West Walk. I'm here in my room, having gone through and packed, and really all I've got to do is just put the last few bits of electronics into my pack and then close it up, and then I'm pretty much right to go. And tomorrow morning when I go downstairs, I just need to drop my duffel bag off with my street clothes for wearing travelling, and also a few other bits and pieces in there as well. I spent today doing a few things. I went down and had a look at the trailhead, and it's really interesting. When you look at Google Maps, there's what appears to be a railway track between the main street, or one of the main streets where you have to cross to get to the trailhead. And I'd already planned to go down to an access road and come up through that, or in the case of where I'm staying, I can cross over and come up through that area. But I realised after talking to someone on the bus yesterday and having a look at it, it's actually a tourist tram that does a couple of trips a day, and the tracks are actually bedded in grass, and there's an access set of stairs down there, so you can just walk across them quite easily, just making sure that there's no trains or trams running. The main train line is actually a bit further south, and that's the one that when it's accessed when going, I think that train track is actually from the aluminium smelter. Went through and had a look at that, found an outdoor store in Portland, and it's always good to know. Quite often with a lot of the smaller country towns, and Portland's not a tiny town by any mean. It's got a McDonald's, it's got a population of about 10,000 people, so it's a good size. But quite often you find that there's a very limited range of what's available. And certainly it's not a full-on hiking and camping store, but it's got quite a lot. It's more the old outfitter type stores they used to have many years ago, the disposal type stores. But they sell integrated stove units, they sell a range of outdoor footwear, they sell all sorts of little bits and pieces that if you are, including gas, so if you are desperate, you can pick up gas cylinders of pretty much any size. I found with a lot of rural towns in country Australia that quite often they'll stock the middle and the large size canisters, which are really wonderful if you're going through and car camping and you don't have to carry them. But this one here actually stocks the small cylinders as well, so it's good to know. Found a really good cafe this morning, 12-fold, and it was, I must admit, I thought, oh, Jesus, it's an expensive breakfast, but the bloody huge plate of food came out, and it was sort of definitely bigger than I was expecting, and it was really good food. So I'd had that recommended to me by the person on the bus, and it is really nice food. So more than happy to go back there again, and I will do when I drop back into Portland at the end of the trip, and I've got a day's break before I head off. Looking forward to tomorrow's trip. Originally, the forecast was I had 2 days out of the following week where I had a couple of mils of rain each day, and the forecast is for somewhere tomorrow between 1 and 3 mils of rain, so not a huge amount, but unfortunately it's between about 4 and 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, which is pretty much when I'm walking, so I think I'm going to be heading off in rain. But I've got the rain gear, but it's just nice to know. Hopefully it'll stop by that stage. Had a good day wandering around, looking at some of the really old buildings in Portland, and it's really interesting. You find, when you look at towns like Ballarat as an example, and Bendigo, which are in the goldfields area of Victoria, they have a lot of money they could spend on really amazing buildings. And Portland's not as flash as those areas, but they've got some really nice old buildings and some stone buildings, which indicates that 150 odd years ago when these things were put up, that there was some money floating around in this area. So there's some, the modern buildings don't tend to overshadow these old buildings. It's really a good mix. Okay, I've just got to do a couple of last minute bits and pieces, and then I'm going to go to bed and have a good long sleep, and I will be up and ready to go. Hopefully I will be off and walking by 7:30 in the morning. Good morning. It's just on 8 o'clock. I realised I've been going for roughly about half an hour and didn't actually do a podcast recording when I started. I did take probably a 15-20 minute break to do some social media, get out Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be trying to post on both those platforms on a daily basis, internet access allowing. Weather condition is reasonably good. It's probably around about 12 degrees at the moment, and the rain that was forecast, I was going to get anything up to 4 mils of rain, and it looked like it was potentially going to be raining from about 4 a.m. this morning through to about midday, but that didn't eventuate. So the front that was coming through from Western Australia looks like it's weakened and it's shifted further south. We may still get some rain on the trail, but if we do, it'll be short and sharp, I think. And then certainly for the rest of the week, the forecast is really good. I think today's forecast was 21 degrees, and I think tomorrow's 23 degrees. And I must admit, I do prefer it slightly cooler. One thing I'll be doing with this podcast is for today and probably tomorrow, I'll be doing probably 5 or 6 recordings a day, just to sort of let you know how a typical day is working. And then from there, I'll shift over to a single post for the entire day. This is something a bit different for me. So rather than doing sort of 5 or 6 posts every day for an extended period, this will sort of help to shorten the podcast duration and still provide the overview of what's happening. Love the coastal environment. It's certainly one of my favourites, that and arid hiking. So I am looking at where I'm going at the moment. I can see the next post is probably 15 metres in front of me, and then there's another one about 75 metres away, and then I'll be going up onto the headland from the beach and walking around there. So looking forward to this. I've talked to a number of people this morning. They've been really pleasant, really happy on doing this walk, saying it's a brilliant walk. So it's a community that seems to be supporting this walk really well. So it's good to see. Okay, talk to you later. It's just after 9:30 in the morning. I've been going for 2 hours. Not all of that walking, and I've covered around about 6.8 kilometres, just on 7 kilometres. So I'm moving reasonably well. Having said that, the ground is fairly flat. I'm not going up any steep inclines, apart from the steep set of stairs coming off the beach in Portland. It's been pretty stable. The signposts have been reasonably good all the way, although I'm coming into a little town just north of Portland, or a little residential area just north of Portland. And just while I think about it, you may hear the wind in the background. I just can't seem to get out of the wind at the moment. It seems to be blowing from every direction, depending on which way I turn. And you might also hear the waves in the background. I'm sitting on the inside of a breakwall. 7 metres above sea level. If I stand up, I can see the ocean just on the other side of the breakwall. I had a short stop where I had to put my rain jacket on. It started to rain probably for around about 25, 30 minutes, and it wasn't heavy, but if I hadn't put the jacket on, I certainly would have had a soaked top. And I've left the jacket on even though it's had stopped raining, only because this wind is a bit cool. So I think once I actually get out of the open and into forested bush area, I'll see what that happens from there. It's a reasonably self-explanatory sort of track. I looked on the map before I started, and I've got the map and the guidebook with me. But you're heading virtually north of Portland, and then you head west at some point in through bushland. And I think looking along the coastline, pretty much I've been passing rural and residential properties all the way along, and there's nowhere really to access inland, and it's fairly open sort of farmland area. But in the next kilometre or two, I know there's pretty much bushland, and I'm expecting that's where I will turn. It's just the logical place. It makes sense based on what the map shows. I've been walking for a while along the side of the road. Now, probably 25 metres off the road, but you may hear cars coming past. So a noisy one is coming now. And sometimes I'm very close to the road. That was a tractor. Sometimes I'm very close to the road. Other times I'm sort of, as I said, I'm around about 20, 25 metres off the road. And I think it's one of those sort of things that while this is probably the worst area, I suppose, of the trail, and again, when I say worst, it's only because I am walking along the edge of the road. It's interesting. I wouldn't want to do the whole track this way, but I know that I'm getting to a point fairly soon where I will be turning into bushland. So moving fairly happily at the moment. Pack weight's good, and as I said, we've got cloud cover at the moment, and it looks like most of the rain has gone, but I can sort of see it moving over towards Melbourne direction. Looking back the way I've come from, there's still cloud cover, but it doesn't look like it's carrying much rain, at least at the moment. Okay, I'll just finish my short break and head on. It's 11:25, and I've just stopped at Bulwara Public Hall, which is next to the highway and the primary school, just for an early lunch break. I've been going for pretty much on 4 hours. So apparently I've got about 10.2 kilometres left, having done 10 kilometres according to the guidebook. So pretty much halfway there, and I thought it was a good time to stop. And it was actually a recommendation in the guidebook saying there's some seats here, which there are. There's some picnic tables, so you can go through and sit down, have a bit of comfort, get off the wet ground if there is, but it's not too bad at the moment. I actually stopped probably around about 15, 20 minutes ago. Coming out of the reserve that I'd gone through, the arrow pointed left, and I walked left, and I went a long way, and there was just no other marker at all. So I thought, I think I'm on the right track, but I just wanted to check. So sure enough, I went through and had a look at the map, and it was all okay, but it would have been good to have a trail marker, probably about 20 metres, 30 metres after I turned. That just reinforces the fact you're on the right track when you are making a change in direction. And certainly the tracks that do this, it does make it so much easier and give you a lot more confidence in which direction you're going. So weather-wise, after the last podcast recording, virtually as soon as I finished it, probably had the heaviest rain of the day. It wasn't heavy by any means, but it means I had to quickly put stuff away and zip the jacket up and pull the hood on again. Only lasted for about 30 seconds, 40 seconds, but it was just a bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting it. Pretty much overcast at the moment. There's probably say 70% cloud cover, the odd bit of blue sky here and there. There's a breeze blowing, so I am out in the open where I am, and it's still got the rain jacket on, mainly because of the coolness of the breeze. So I'll be here probably 10, 15 minutes, and then I will head off. And based on the way I'm going at the moment, this trip supposedly takes about 7 hours, and that's probably about right, was where I'll get to, particularly given that I'm stopping and doing social media and taking a lot of photos as I go. Okay, talk to you later. It's 1:37. I've just stopped for a break on the convenient log on the side of the road. I'm walking along Management Road at the moment, heading towards Cubby's Camp. According to Google Maps, it's 4.9 kilometres, but that's not necessarily following the path. But certainly less than 5 kilometres to go, which will get me there roughly between 2:30 to 3 o'clock-ish. Certainly starting to feel it now. I realise this has been by the time I finish today's walk, this will have been the longest walk and the heaviest pack that I've carried since my hip replacement. So hips holding up really well. It's just fitness is going to be the thing more than anything else. Got reasonably warm this afternoon. I don't know what the temperature is, but I took my rain jacket off because I was getting a bit hot, and it's certainly warm enough that I don't need it. So I've just got a lightweight long sleeve top on, and the vegetation is varying. It's definitely different than what I'm used to as far as plant species wise. And I've been walking alongside the railway track in some sections, through bushland in between farming properties, and now on the Management Road, which I think pretty much takes me up to or very close to where I'm heading to. That's me for the moment. It's 6:25. I'm here in my tent at Cubby Campground. I've been inside the tent probably for about an hour, just dozing slightly, thinking I must do this last recording for the day, and I thought if I can do this, that way I can just go to sleep. It is very early, but it's starting to get dark now, so I'd rather go to bed and sleep as long as I can, just to refresh myself from today's hard push. And just listening in the background now, all the nightlife is coming out, the birds are starting to make some noises, the mopoke or whatever the version over here is. So it's not going to be a cold night. I think the forecast is for roughly around about 9-10 degrees, and even now it's fairly mild. I've got a lightweight sleeping bag liner on just to protect the sleeping bag, and the sleeping bag's pretty much spread open like a quilt. So if need be, I can always zip it up. But this is a new summer-weight sleeping bag that I'm trying out, courtesy of One Planet. And we've always, in the past, had single sleeping bags. So a sleeping bag that'll do us the entire year, no matter how cold it gets. But that means it is a bit cold, a bit warm during the summertime. So we thought, now's a good opportunity to actually get a sleeping bag that will do us for our summer conditions. And it is April, May was when this trip is. But the forecast is not sort of minus 3, 4, 5 degree temperatures. And I think the bag that I'm testing out is warm down to about -2 for a male. So I think I'll be quite toasty and warm. Okay, I think that's it for the day. I will try to go to sleep. It's 7:28 on Sunday the 20th. I'm here at Cubby Camp. It's reasonably light. I mean, the sun has come up, but because I'm in relatively dense trees, the sun's sort of filtering through the trees. So it's a good day so far. The temperature-wise is not too cold, so I'm just sitting here with my thin weight long sleeve top and feeling quite comfortable, so definitely don't need another layer on. Had a relatively good night's sleep last night. I'm not quite sure how many hours I ended up getting, but I think I woke up at around about 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and then 5 o'clock. But normally that was because I just needed to go to the loo, and also the animal life was varying around the place. I had something heavily breathing outside my tent at one point, so I shone the light around the place and it obviously disappeared. I had a tree fall at around about 5:30. I had a loud crack and then a tree going down, not inside the camp, but probably by the sound of it was probably around about 80 or 90 metres away from my tent into the bushland itself, but I just can't see where it is. Good night's sleep overall, as I said. Testing out a new sleeping bag. And again, this was a sleeping bag that's rated from a male perspective to 2 degrees. And for probably until 9 o'clock, which is when I first woke up, I actually had pretty much just zipped up at the feet and acting as a quilt more than anything else. So as it started to get a bit cooler, I zipped it up. And even at that stage, I had my arms and my upper torso out. And it wasn't until later in the evening when it started to get a bit cooler that I actually put the bag on itself. But even then, I still had my arms out. So doing a good job. And it is nice to actually have a sleeping bag that's fit for purpose, if you like. I mean, I know not everyone can afford 2 sleeping bags, and you've got to basically cater for your coldest conditions, which means you've generally got a sleeping bag that's overly warm for the summertime. But yeah, I'm definitely glad I got this one. It's it really is nice. It's comfy and it does the job quite well. So it's just at the moment I'm just slowly packing up my pack. I'm having breakfast as I go. I've changed since the South Coast Trek in Tasmania a couple of years ago. I've changed what I do with breakfast. I used to have something like porridge, overnight oats. I'd actually have a hot cup of tea, and I'm no longer doing that. I just find that as much as I love a cup of tea in the morning, I don't know, I just rather get up and going. So, and sometimes I'll even eat on the trail over the first half hour. So I'm eating a breakfast bar or nuts or dried fruit, and that sort of keeps me going, and then I just graze on through the day. So at no stage yesterday did I feel like I was running out of food, and in fact I've got an awful lot of food left over from last night. And this is one of the things, I did an article a few years ago. In my case, exercise reduces my appetite. So when I've really pushed myself hard, the last thing I want to do is eat at the end of the day. So I've got some meal bags, which are quite small and compact, but I just couldn't eat it all. It was definitely would have done Jill and I quite comfortably. So looking forward to pushing on today. No rain today. We had a couple of short showers, probably, it would have been 20 seconds through the night, and then that was it. And today it looks like it is forecast to be a clear day. So I'm a bit out of the wind today at the moment, but again, whether I stay into these woodland, I don't know. I'll see what happens. So today's destination is Cutout Camp. Just stopped for having morning tea at an appropriate log. Been going for roughly about an hour and 16 minutes. Just a convenient place to stop. And I've covered just on 6.8 kilometres. So I'm moving pretty fast. And in all honesty, from my own perspective, this is faster than I've moved in years. So certainly the fitness, while I need to lose weight, certainly I've got the ability to move pretty quickly, which is good. Today has been pretty much spent walking through forests and bushland for the whole time. And I'm just about to come out and walk along. I'm either about to go into more bushland or come out, walk along the farm fence. It's a bit hard to tell, around about 60 metres. Temperature-wise, I think it's supposed to be about 23 degrees today, and it's feeling like it is warm. There's no doubt about that. Yesterday I had the wind, and that certainly impacted on what I was doing. It was a bit colder, but today's quite nice. So at the moment it's 15.4 degrees. Oh no, maximum of 19. So looking pretty good, and I think it is 19 is pretty much the maximum. So looking fine and looking good sort of temperature. One of the things I've had problems with, and it's not a problem as such, but Jill sent me a text message because I can actually get phone signal and text signal here at the moment, and saying that the track looks a bit weird. And I am changing directions quite a lot, there's no doubt about that. I'm weaving in through the forest and doing some ups and downs, and not switchbacks, but almost that sort of thing where I'm changing direction quite quickly. But one of the issues is I'm walking through relatively dense forests, so I'm not picking up good satellite signal through the trees. So this next section, at least, I should be able to pick that back up, and it'll at least show up on the map, because Jill is following me on the online map, so she should be able to see where I am. Okay, I'll keep on going with my break and my morning tea, and I'll talk to you later. It's just before 10 o'clock on Monday morning. I've been going for about an hour and 16 minutes, and I've covered 6.8 kilometres. Moving pretty quickly, actually, and I feel like I'm moving more quickly than I have done in years. And it's, apart from the fact I'm carrying more weight than I should do, and I'm noticing that. But, yeah, certainly I'm moving pretty quickly. And the ground the path's good. It's not huge hills at all. The elevation changes are pretty stable, so it's easier to move quickly on this sort of track. Yesterday was classed as easy on the from the Great Southwest Walk people. Today is marginally, not quite medium, but it's a bit harder than easy. But it's still looking like a pretty good sort of day to walk and make some distance. Given that I've covered 6.84 kilometres, and that was also time spent walking around the camp and getting ready this morning, I've probably got about 8 or 9 kilometres left to go to get where I'm going. So if I keep on moving at this pace, potentially 2 hours, I'm likely to be there before lunchtime. I don't think that's the case, but I think I will definitely be there by 2:30 this afternoon without any problem. This is one of these tracks where you're not supposed to camp in between campsites. So if I wanted to go on to the next campsite, I've got a further 22 kilometres to go. That would have given me 37 kilometres for the day, and that's probably pushing it a bit much, I think. There's no way I can do that, and I would have had to have left probably about 6 o'clock to do it anyway. So just sitting on the side of the track having morning tea, taking a break. I always take advantage of a log when I can find one, and temperature's around about 15 degrees, which is quite nice. Maximum of 19 degrees today, which was quite reasonable. Walking through bushland and forest pretty much since I left camp this morning, and that did play havoc with my satellite communicator. Jill sent me a text message because I can actually get phone signal and text at the moment when I've got my phone outside of airplane mode, and she was saying that the map looks like it's doing weird things, and it's doing weird things at my end as well. It's trying to tell me that I'm moving at 7.8 kilometres an hour, and I've covered just on 10 kilometres, which is not quite right. So playing havoc when I turned it on this morning, and I couldn't get a good satellite signal, so that's what happens. Having said that, I'm sitting in the open at the moment, so while I've been sitting here having morning tea, I think it'll realign itself, and Jill should be able to pick up what I'm doing. But having said that, I have been weaving around the forest, so I've been changing directions, been having turns and some little weird bits and pieces anyway, but I think it's just not showing up on the map as well as it should do for Jill. Okay, I will finish off my morning tea and keep on going. It's just on midday and I've stopped for lunch. Normally what I'll do from a lunch perspective is from about 11:30 onwards, I'll start looking at a good spot to sit, and I'll have stopped by 12:30 at the latest. Just means that if I see a good log or somewhere good to sit, I'll stop whatever time it happens to be in that window. It's just on 17 degrees at the moment. I've covered roughly about 12 kilometres, so that means I've got about 3 kilometres left to go. And again, moving at a pretty good pace still. And the track's been easy to follow. It's nice and wide. Looks like they put a slasher through, at least on a semi-regular basis. So there's a worn track in the middle, and then the grass is being cut on either side of the track. So it's an easy sort of route to follow, and apart from the occasional uphill, it's relatively flat. Moving through various forests still, and again, pretty much the entire day has been through woodland, with only one section where I walked past a farm where it was sort of a bit of a connecting point between one forest and the next. But otherwise, I've got forest all around me at the moment, and I've got various animals rustling around in the bush, and the occasional bird making noises every so often. The sun has probably come out more. We had a light cloud cover for most of the morning, but now it's gone back to cloud with more blue sky than anything else, and it's quite a pleasant sort of day. I'm here at Cutout Camp. I arrived at 2:15, so 5.5 hours in total, which was pretty good. I had forgotten that there was a detour on this section. I was aware of it, but I just forgot. So I got to the detour sign and saw the sign, and I thought, oh my God, this is not a short detour. And sure enough, instead of being a 15-kilometre day, it ended up being a 19-kilometre day. Not a problem, but it's just I'd geared myself up for the shorter walk, and I was doing really well on the shorter walk. And yeah, never mind. Travelled reasonably fast. Mind you, when I did stop and have lunch, as soon as I got back up and started walking again, I was walking at a slower pace than before lunchtime. And I think it was because I knew that I wasn't going to have an issue with time. Given how early it is now, I'll set the tent up a bit later on, and I'll probably put it fairly close to the hut, given that I'm not expecting anyone else here tonight. So I think I've got the campground to myself. There is a couple from Melbourne, I think it is, Melbourne or Sydney, that are doing the hike in the same number of days, a day ahead of me, and I don't think I will catch up to them unless they decide to take a rest day. I think they're going to stay the day ahead of me. The walk until the detour was all through forested area. It was really good walking, different types of forests through the day, and then the road. Well, the forests were good on the other side of the road, but it was a hard-packed natural road that had just gone through and done some work on, so it wasn't particularly soft. So I certainly felt the effort of walking on that road. The campsite here at Cutout is pretty much the same as last night. It's got the toilet and the water tank. It's got the little shelter and the water tank over here as well. A little fire pit and 2 picnic tables. And there's plenty of space to put tents all around the site. After hearing that tree crack and fall down last night, definitely not going to be putting it under some of the trees that look like they've got weak branches on them. But as I said, it'll probably end up being close to the hut just to keep me a bit more sheltered in case the wind does come up. Okay, I think that is me. I've got a few hours before I can realistically have dinner. I don't mind having dinner at about 4:30, but it's probably a bit early now. And I'll do that later on and get my tent set up over the next couple of hours as well. It's 6:27 on day 2 of my Great Southwest Walk. I'm here at Cutout Camp. And I've gone through and packed up for the night. I've had my dinner and I'm right to go to bed. A bit later than last night. I spent this afternoon just getting sorted out and having a look around, and all ready to go to bed with a bit more of an appetite today. So I actually finished off all my meal and all my snacks today, so playing catch up from yesterday where I didn't eat as much as I probably should have. Tomorrow morning I'll be heading to Fitzroy Camp, and that is approximately 22.9 kilometres. The halfway point being, and it's not Corroboree, but Corroboree, a camp which is about 11 kilometres in. So most people do tend to double hut it with this section. 11 kilometres is just a bit short, unless you're taking it really leisurely. Given that I ended up doing 19 odd kilometres today because of the detour, an extra 3 kilometres, potentially an extra hour. So should get in probably be around about 2:30, 2:45, which is what I did yesterday. What I'll end up doing from tomorrow onwards is yesterday and today I've done 5 or 6 or 7 recordings each day just to show you what a typical day is like. And then from now on, I'll go through and do 1 recording per day. It'll be a longer recording, and I'll do it at the end of the evening and talk about the whole day and what happened in one go. Okay, that's all from me. I will talk to you tomorrow. One Planet is an Australian-owned outdoor company dedicated to local manufacturing. Established in 1979, they specialised in lightweight equipment for bushwalking and travel, focusing on backpacks, sleeping bags, tents and apparel. All gear is designed and developed in their Melbourne factory, where most products are also made. From a sustainability perspective, they have a rooftop solar farm which powers the production, and they've also been offsetting carbon waste since 2005. All repairs are handled in-house. One Planet products give you the absolute protection, comfort and freedom in the wilderness that ultimately embodies their commitment to creating the best and most sustainable equipment possible. If you're after a range of Australian-designed and made outdoor gear that will stand up to the harshest conditions, whatever the activity may be, then One Planet is the place to go. It's 6 o'clock on day 3 of my journey on the Great Southwest Walk. I'm here at Fitzroy Camp, having left Cutout Camp this morning. This was another day which was a day of two halves, and for a couple of reasons. First up, travelling wise, I was moving reasonably quickly this morning until about lunchtime, and lunchtime was 11 o'clock when I arrived at Corroboree Camp, and forgive me for the pronunciation on this. It's one that I'm not quite sure exactly how to pronounce it. That camp is around about 11 kilometres in, so halfway, and it means that if you're going to take things nice and slowly, you could have an 11 kilometre day. You could have 11 kilometre day to there, another roughly 11 kilometre day to Fitzroy Camp, and just take things nice and slowly. But it appears that most people, not all, skip Corroboree Camp and come straight through to Fitzroy. In the afternoon, I was much slower, and that was for a couple of reasons. I don't know who was more startled, the tiger snake or me, and I think I was almost on top of it before it realised I was there, and vice versa. And then it startled and snuck away as quickly as it could. And normally with tiger snakes, they get a bit aggressive and they do tend to do the threat pose and hiss at you. This thing was moving fairly quickly. Definitely a tiger snake though, because I definitely had a chance to have a look at it. And it wasn't a full adult, it was probably a juvenile, probably about 1 metre long, but not as thick and bulky as the adults tend to be. As a result, I was scanning the track for the rest of the day, and I always do, but in this instance, the snake was perfectly coloured to the vegetation on the track, so I did not see it at all until I was very, very close to it, and usually that's pretty rare. So as I said, I was travelling a bit slower, scanning the track a lot more, making sure there were no other snakes, but that was about it. So I left at around about 10 to 9 this morning, and I got here at around about 3:15 this afternoon. The other thing with the moving slower in the afternoon is the mist burnt off probably around about, say, 9:30, 10 o'clock, and it went to be a fairly warm day, and the forecast was for 25 degrees, and I really did feel it. The other thing about being a day of two halves was the morning was when I saw everything animal-wise. So first up, I was walking along the track, probably not too long, probably about half an hour into the walk, and there was a goat in the middle of the track. Fairly healthy-looking male goat. Normally you see a lot of feral animals, they tend to be a bit straggly. This goat was very fat and happy, and goats tend to be able to eat anything to survive well, so not surprising. It saw me, shot off to the side of the track. By the time I got up to it, there was 4, possibly 5 goats in a group about 40, 50 metres off the track. I got a photo but it was really hard to tell. There's definitely 4 goats. I'm not quite sure if there was 5, and they moved away slowly rather than hanging around. Next up, as I mentioned, the snake, and it was just sunning itself in the middle of the track. And not long after that, we had a couple of wallabies, and the wallabies, normally they tend to be really skittish. You see a wallaby and it races off. The first one, I put my camera on and slowly moved towards it, and I probably got within 5 metres of it before it decided to move. Then not long after that was a large male, and again, it didn't move that fast to get Adam away, which is surprising. And then probably another 50 to 100 metres from there, 3 large kangaroos. I obviously startled them, and they were probably 30, 40 metres away, and they hopped from one side of the bush to the other, and they were bounding quite high because they had to get over some fallen trees. So normally when you get the really dense forest and dense bush, it's more wallabies than kangaroos, but they were obviously happy where they were. This afternoon, nothing, no animal life whatsoever. And possibly you can hear the cicadas in the background, and there was the occasional bird, but apart from that, it was pretty quiet this afternoon. The other issue that I had, and again, this is all my fault, my water filter, my Katadyn Be Free, was probably getting to the end of its life as far as use-wise. But the other thing is that with the hollow core filters, like Sawyer, like Katadyn, and a few of the other brands as well, if they freeze, the hollow core tends to collapse and the thing becomes useless. Now, in my case, I live in Canberra. The minimum temperature can be anywhere between -4 to -7.5, and my gear is stored in the garage. And I think that by the look of it, it's some of the hollow cores had started to collapse. So it was almost impossible to get water out of it. Now, usually, again, the other error in my favour is that I will always tend to carry Aquamira tablets or drops. I didn't. They're in my other first aid kit, and I should have checked a bit more closely. So as a result, I'm now drinking unfiltered water. So see how I go for the rest of the trip. But yeah, it's not much else I can do about it. And then in getting to camp this afternoon, 2.5 litres, in fact I was a 2.5 litre bladder. I had probably 2 litres in there, and I ran short of water, probably about 500 metres short of the camp. So really now, as I said, I'm using unfiltered water. I've got a 2.5 litre bladder. I've got the Katadyn Be Free, which I tend to use during the night time if I need something to drink, and I will do. I've had a hot chocolate. I've had a sustagen and milk powder just to boost the protein, and that's with boiled water. And again, the boiled water for dinner, but it was just the drinking water, and not much I can do about that. When I get to Nelson in a few days' time, my understanding is there's no outdoor stores there. I'm almost hoping there is a chemist, because chemists usually do stock water purification tablets, but I'm not holding my breath. I don't think there is one there at all. So it looks like I'm drinking unfiltered water for the rest of the trip. The 2 campsites today, Corroborrie and Fitzroy. Corroborrie, again, excuse the pronunciation, it's a nice sort of camp, traditional compared to the others, a shelter, a picnic table, a toilet, and there's 2 water tanks, one on the toilet and one on the actual shelter itself, so plenty of water to draw from. The Corroborrie camp is pretty much all bare soil, and it's quite large compared to last night at Cutout Camp, which was pretty much all grass. And the first camp was pretty much all bare soil as well. So this one is bare red soil. Not that it makes a difference, but you can tell that the soil is changing. And I think that potentially, if it was sopping with rain or pouring with rain, you're getting a bit muddy. So I do actually have a sit pad, and that's what I use to get in and out of the tent or to put my feet on, to put my shoes in, just to help minimise the dirt inside the tent. Vegetation-wise, pretty much the entire day, with the exception of crossing the road, I was walking through forests of various types. And again, when I was crossing the road, it was just because someone had put a road in there and cut through the middle of the forest. But, there was only these 10 metre, 15 metre gaps between one side of the forest and the other. The forest is reasonably heavy all the way through, and I know that I could not get a signal on my Garmin InReach. It's just too solid. Now, maybe I could have left it on for an hour and see what happened there, to hopefully see if there was a satellite passed overhead. But rather than doing that, I've just turned it off. I did manage to get a text message. And again, one of these weird things, iMessages didn't work, straight text messages did. So I managed to get text message out to my sister and my wife, just to say I'm here. So those messages got through, and I did actually manage to get a phone call out, but that's really hit and miss. So I'm hoping tomorrow when I go to call Jill at roughly about 7 o'clock, the signal will be better. Okay, that was day 3. Again, the forest walking was really good. There was no doubt about that. The track is just a worn track, but it looks like they put a slasher through there, and the track was probably about 4 metres wide with a worn track down the middle. A few more fallen trees in the last couple of days. Some of them were quite large and you had no choice but to climb up over them. I couldn't get around them because it was just too thick a bush. So I'm assuming that they probably go through and clear the tree falls once, maybe twice a year, and it'll be done on a calendar period where they do that. The toilets still have toilet paper, so again, the toilet paper I've bought, not necessary. I'll see what happens to the end of the trip and see if it lasts all the way through. Tomorrow was supposed to be 23 degrees, a bit better, but still a bit too warm for my liking. And we are supposed to be getting rain in the next day or so. The other thing with this campsite is there is a potential diversion. Now, this is a wet weather diversion when you've had a lot of rain, and the guidebook actually says you may not need to use the diversion more often than not. Really what it comes down to is if it's been heavy rain certain times of the year, you're going to need the diversion. And they do recommend that you go down the 500 metres to where you've got to cross and see if you need it. If you do, turn around and come back and use the diversion. But more often than not, you don't need to and you can just cross over. So all these little diversions, I must admit, I looked at the guidebook, but I only skimmed it. So it's interesting to see what's happening with the diversions as they're coming through. Okay, that's it from me. Talk to you later. Bye. It's 6:07 in the evening. I'm here at Moleside Campground, and it took me just on 8 hours to get here. I must admit, I dawdled a bit in the morning, and partly that was my own fault. I took what I thought was the standard route this morning instead of what I thought was the detour, but I actually ended up taking the detour, which was only an additional 800 metres, but it took me probably 40 minutes to work out what I'd done and then get back on trail again, but work out where I was and what I needed to do. But that did slow me down a bit. Temperature didn't get as hot as yesterday. The forecast was for 23, and I think it got to that sort of extent later in the afternoon. But I was moving reasonably steady, but the day's terrain was classed as medium, a few more hills to traverse. Not steep by any means, but certainly enough to slow me down. In leaving the camp this morning, I did manage to get a hold of Jill by phone, but it was really one of those sort of situations where you stand on one leg and poke your tongue out to get the phone to work. Having said that, I'm here at Moleside at the moment. I've got no phone, no internet signal whatsoever. I did actually manage to get out a signal or a message on my satellite communicator because I've got a fairly open view to the sky, which I didn't have the last couple of evenings. Moleside as a camp is a joined camp. It is connected to the canoe camp, and the toilets. There's actually two toilet blocks, a double toilet, and they're over on the canoe side. The walk-in campground is immediately next door, so you walk into the main canoe campground, and then you walk up a short set of stairs, and you've probably got about a 30-metre walk to the shelter and the table. There's no standalone toilets over with the walk-in area. You've got to walk probably about 40, 50 metres to get to the toilets on the canoe area. Few flies in the hut, and when I was getting myself sorted out, there just seemed to be flies everywhere. But as soon as I went outside, it was fine. So I went and actually had dinner at the outside picnic table, and it was worked out okay, but there were just flies everywhere. There's a batch of wallabies, and I don't know what the species are. They're a fairly small sort of wallaby, and they were just grazing on the grass when I got here. Some of them just did not care. Some of them I got within sort of 3 or 4 metres of. Others, as soon as I appeared, there was one in particular that hopped away. I was a bit concerned about having people around. So I'm guessing they'll be wandering around at night time making noise and grazing because the grass here is actually quite lush, and I'm sure they enjoy it quite well. All up today, I did approximately just on 22 kilometres, and tomorrow I've got 21 kilometres. Then the last 2 days into Nelson get a bit shorter. So apart from doing this recording, I'm just charging my electronics just to make sure everything's working the way it should do, and that that should last me for the next couple of days, with the exception of probably the phone will need to be charged again. But I do have, I'm actually carrying 2 power banks, a small one and a larger one, and that should be quite suitable to get me through what I need to do. You may or may not be able to hear it in the background. There's crickets next to a pond, and they are just really noisy. But yeah, there's a pond probably about, from where my tent is, probably 25 metres away, and it's just full of rushes. But yeah, very noisy. And yeah, there's a couple of groups down in the canoe area. So for the first time, I'm actually sharing a campground with other people. Still no other hikers. There is a hiker or a couple that started one day ahead of me. They were on the bus coming into Portland and I was, but they didn't take a rest day. I did. So highly unlikely I'll see them. They're taking the same number of days as I am. So unless they decide to change something, I'm going to be sitting a day behind them. Okay, that is all for today. I will finish up and just do some charging and check on what I'm doing tomorrow. Oh, one other thing I didn't mention, as I said, the internet is pretty much non-existent today. So I managed to get out a Facebook post, but could not for the life of me get out Instagram. It just needed a bit more grunt as far as signal was concerned. So the posting will be a bit erratic based on when I get access. And I think as I start coming in towards Nelson, I should start picking up a stronger signal. It's 7:14 on day 5. I'm here at Battersby Camp. I've got one more night after this to sleep on trail, then I'm in Nelson. Today was an eventful day for a couple of reasons. I tried to leave camp at around about 7:30. Just can't seem to do it with social media and the lack of internet. So all I can do is write the posts up, ready to upload when I do get a chance to do it. The trip itself was fine. I was moving reasonably fast, at least I thought so. Then 90 minutes in, I stopped and had a break and had a look at what I was doing. And based on what my Garmin was telling me, I was going to get to camp at around about 4 o'clock, which I thought that's a bit odd, but never mind. And then I started slowing down during the day with the heat, and I thought this is going to be really bad. What's going on? And I keep on forgetting that with my Garmin, when I put it in expedition mode, it records data slightly differently. And it's wonderful if you're traveling in a straight line, but if you're traveling zigzagging and following a river course like I was, it drops pins and draws straight lines between the pins at a fairly infrequent mode. So as a result, the distance just doesn't seem to be there. So by the end of it, I ended up getting in around about 6 hours 45 after I started and averaging 21 minutes per kilometre, which is not bad given this is my first long distance hike post-tip operation. No real wildlife at all today, not on trail anyway, with one exception. I was just about to stop and have lunch, and something just shot into the bush from right beside the trail. And it wasn't a wallaby or a kangaroo. They don't move that way. This thing had legs, so I'm just not quite sure what it was. Possibly a goat, I just don't know. But yeah, it startled me. And as I said, normally when kangaroos and wallabies move, it's a very distinct sound, but I don't know what this was. So I had a break and had not a snooze, I suppose, but just had a bit of a lie down and trying to work out what I was doing time-wise, and then continued to move on. Then at one point during the afternoon, I thought, I'm running out of water, what's going on? And I'm pretty good at judging how much water is in my bladder. And when I opened it up, sure enough, there was a kink in the hose and I still had a litre of water left, which was fine considering the distance I had to go. But I'm thinking, what am I doing wrong today? Following the river, the Glenelg River, for most of the day. And when I wasn't following the river, I was in forest, dense forest. And even when I was following the river, I had forest on the one sides. You can't say this is an open, sparse sort of hike. Lots of trees. Got into camp, and it was funny actually. I got to the public camp and thought, the other camp, the walk-in camp, probably around about half a kilometre away like it was over the last couple of days, or 2 days ago. So what I'll do is I'll have a bit of a break. And I was watching someone on a fairly serious four-wheel drive trying to reverse park a caravan. And I do say trying. And at one point I almost offered to go over and help, because I've never seen anyone make such a bad job of trying to reverse a caravan. I gave up because I thought, look, I'm probably putting him off. And then within about 15, 20 minutes, he was gone. He just kept on giving up. He kept on trying and kept on giving up. He just could not seem to get where he was trying to get in. The actual walkers' campground was probably only 40 metres on. It was just through a small gap, and there was the hut and the fire pit and the table, like everything else. And the table was shared between the public camp and the walkers' camp. And there were two toilets, so a disabled toilet and a male and female toilet. No toilet paper in the male and female toilet, and very little in the disabled toilet. And I must admit, I do bring toilet paper just in case, and certainly if there had been any more than me staying here, that was going to be a struggle to be enough toilet paper. As I arrived, there was a school group who I'd seen the day before doing canoeing as an activity, and they'd moved from a different location yesterday to where I was today, and they were just pulling their canoes out, and I had a bit of a chat to them. And I can't remember doing this sort of exciting adventures when I was at school. And I did ask them, I said, do they do the Great South Walk as part of their curriculum? And they said, yes, they do. So when I got to camp, there was a packet of water purification tablets and a note from someone who was aware of, from a previous post, that I was having problems and wanted to help out. And I'm just overwhelmed at the generosity of some people. It's just amazing, and it just shows you what people are willing to do to help out in this sort of activity that we do in the outdoors. So that means I'll be going through and using purified water for the duration of the trip, and hopefully I won't manage to pick up any bugs. I've had Giardia in the past, never want to get it again. Also don't want to get gastro on trail, although strangely enough, I didn't bring any spare purification tablets with me. I did bring the gastro tablets. Yeah, I've got a couple of posts out of this, and there are things I know that I need to do from a planning perspective, and I've known them all along. For whatever reason, I just didn't do them. So I think you get overconfident and you just forget the obvious, and not having a water purification or a water filtering backup is one of those. So had dinner, had my afternoon protein drink. I went through and put my tent up fairly early because it was still sopping wet from the night before at Moleside, because it was by the river. And this is even closer to the river than last night, so I know my tent's going to wake up sopping wet again through condensation. And even now, I know it's going to be a cool night as well. The last couple of nights, I've actually managed to go to bed using my sleeping bag as a quilt and then zip it up through the night. This time, I've just bypassed the quilt stage and gone straight to having the sleeping bag half zipped up. I expected to have to dry the tent out tomorrow, and also the top of the sleeping bag. I think my breathing was just putting a bit of condensation on the top of the bag, getting a bit of dampness. I was also sitting here reading about what I'm doing tomorrow and trying to get in contact with Jill, and the internet signal is pretty poor. And while I was doing that, there was a family of fairy wrens, and one of the biggest families I've seen. There would have been a male and at least 10 or 12 females just wandering around the camp looking for insects. And it's, supposedly these are birds that they think might be going extinct, but certainly this family seemed to be doing a good job of at least keeping the population up. Then I had a couple of other types of birds wander in. I had a crane down at the wharf this afternoon. I had one of the water waders. So there was more bird life I've seen on the trail in one spot at the camp than I've seen put together for the rest of the trip. I did actually have some cockatoos this morning, black cockatoos, but I couldn't see what colour they were, whether they're red or white or yellow. I just wasn't close enough. I could just hear them screeching as they were flying. I decided to go down, since the canoe wharf was in front of the walkers' camp and sit on the wharf and dangle my feet in the river. Now, if you were any shorter than I am at 6'2" or 185 centimetres, you'd probably be struggling to get your feet in the water. You'd probably have to sort of wade in off the dirt. I did manage to get my feet in the water, 1 foot at a time up to about ankle depth. Then I'd swap over. And that was good because, A, my feet stank, and I managed to get a bit of the dirt and grime off them, and it was a really lovely feeling. So it's worthwhile. I mean, I think if it was middle of summer, I probably would have gone for a swim, and I probably would have bought my swimmers. That's also a consideration if you are doing this in the warmer time of the year. Was around about 23 degrees again today, but for me that's not warm enough to get fully immersed in the river. Okay, that is all from me. I will talk to you in the morning. It's 6:25 p.m. on day 6 of my adventure on the Great Southwest Walk, and today I walked 15 kilometres from Battersby Camp to Patterson Camp. Given there was only 15 kilometres, I expected to arrive somewhere between sort of 1 and 2, depending on how many breaks I was taking. But I ended up arriving probably around about 5 to 1, and I set up my tent to dry out the fly from last night's condensation, which didn't take long, and had a bit of a doze in the cabin itself. I inflated my sleeping mat and just had a bit of a lay down. Apart from having a drink when I got there, I ended up talking to one of the track volunteers who was coming around and updating the track logs. I must admit, when I signed in on the last bit of white page towards the end, and he came in and through, and he was working his way backwards from Nelson through to to Portland at the start over the next couple of days, just to go through and update the logs. It was interesting having a talk to him about what's involved with the track and the work the track volunteers do. And this is one of these strange tracks. It's not a government track. It's run by volunteers, and it was developed by the local community back in the 80s. And as a result, there seems to be a bit of pride in this, and they always try and make the track better as far as they can. And they have a lot of pride in it, so it's good to see. Again, with this track, I spent a lot of the day paralleling the Glenelg River, and I was walking through forest for most of it. So, again, this is if you want a track with trees, this is definitely it. And there's pretty amazing trees. Apparently tomorrow the vegetation changes to coastal at some point, and I also go into South Australia for 4 kilometres, which I haven't really thought about. I knew we came very close to the border, but I thought we actually stayed within Victoria's. 4Ks into South Australia, why not? At least you can say the track covers 2 states. The track itself, the walk itself here was fairly easy. It wasn't difficult at all. And there was a large flock of black cockatoos. And when I talked to the volunteer at Patterson's, he said, yeah, they, particularly over the pine plantations, which is where I saw them. So on the other side of the river, there was where the slope was all natural eucalypt. And then when it was flat above that was pine plantation. And obviously they love the pine cones, so they're in there having a go at it. And he said sometimes the flocks are really large. Getting to Patterson's camp, again, easy sort of thing. Standard setup, a hut, a picnic table and a fire pit and the toilet. And the toilet's adjacent to the canoe and a holiday camp. I haven't been down there and probably won't go down there as well. In the guidebook, it does talk about this being the pick of the tracks or pick of the camps. And I must admit, I think Battersby for me was probably the best one so far. The bird life was spectacular there. Being able to go and dangle my feet in the river was really good, and the wallabies as well. So if I had to pick a camp so far, it's Battersby. Patterson's has a lot of dry, dead grass towards the front. And the volunteer was saying that apparently they released water from the river around about a month ago, so it looks like it's dropped about a metre. So what was underwater is now open and grey. I'm assuming it grows back again after a while, but yeah, I can see it would have been quite high and getting up quite close to the campground. So they would have actually needed to drop the river. And I think the other thing with it as well is all these little pontoons along the way where people launch their boats from, their canoes from, would have been underwater as well or close to it. I kept an eye out for koalas again today, heard them but didn't see them. And I was sitting in the hut talking to the volunteers, and they're pointing out the koala that's right in front of me. I must admit, I just did not look. I was too busy looking at the river and across the river. I wasn't looking up in the trees, and here's this grey fairy ball just wedged in a branch, and he or she was still there. And then there was another one not far behind the hut in one of the 2 or 3 trees immediately close. I could tell it was one of those trees, I just couldn't see it. So I'm assuming I'm going to get lots of grunting going on tonight with koalas vocalising with each other. It'll be interesting to see again, because I'm camped fairly close to the river. I'm guessing about 25, 30 metres away from the water. So I'm guessing I will get condensation on another cool night and a wet fly on the tent. A bit more awkward this time because tomorrow night I'm staying in Nelson. I haven't exactly worked out what my accommodation is yet. I'm looking at either the caravan park or the pub. The volunteers apparently use the pub because the beds are really good, but I know with the hotel, some of them have en suites, some of them had shared bathrooms. So I'll see what happens. I definitely prefer to have my own bathroom. I still don't have good phone and internet signal. I can occasionally get a signal out using the satellite system. And again, this is something that's new to me. I haven't really thought about this before. Apparently it uses the Elon Musk's little styling system and picks up. So it goes from SOS satellite to satellite. And when it says satellite, I can get a short, sharp message through. Anything long, it just doesn't go through. So Jill knows I'm at camp, but that's about it. I thought that I'd actually have more internet signal and phone signal, because she was saying apparently as the crow flies, I'm about 6 kilometres from Nelson. But obviously the phone tower that services Nelson doesn't quite hit through all the bushland, and I am tucked down in the river passage. So I'm guessing it's going over the top of me, but not actually getting close. So at some point tomorrow, whether it's in Nelson or close to Nelson, it means I'll be able to start calling and doing social media and doing posts again. And I've got a batch of those ready, just sitting there to go. Okay, all I've got left to do is just do tomorrow morning's post, and otherwise I'll head to bed again. Talk to you later. It's day 7 on my adventure on the Great Southwest Walk in Victoria, and also in South Australia, because today I was in South Australia for 4 kilometres, and I must admit I didn't realise that was the case until I'd actually started the trip. I knew we came close, but I thought it just touched the border, but it does actually go over the border for a short distance. Funnily enough, there was a sign going into South Australia, but nothing coming out of South Australia, although it felt like the vegetation and the environment changed. And sure enough, when I checked, I'd just crossed over the border. So it was almost a bit of an obvious change. I struggled today, and yes, it was just on 21 kilometres, but I couldn't work out why. I just felt like I was having a real problem. And then once I did actually get back into email range and my phone exploded basically, given I get anything up to 400 emails a week, I discovered that the highest temperature today was 28.5 degrees. So yeah, it was a bit of a shock. I do not cope well with hiking in hot weather. And when I talk about hot weather, it's over 25 degrees. And this was getting close on 30. So it did surprise me. So I was taking more breaks whenever I could find a bit of shade. So it was a surprise how hot it actually got. It surprised me not just because of the heat, because I thought, okay, well, I've been through the heat already. And basically, tomorrow's not too bad, which is my rest day, 22 degrees. And then later in the week, the last 2 days, or last 3 days of the trip, I've got 27, 28 and 26 degrees. So that's going to be a bit of a struggle those days, but at least I'm aware of what the temperatures are now. I've saved the images on my phone. I don't have to worry about checking whether I can access internet or not. The internet came back on just around about 12 o'clock, 12:30ish. And as I said, the phone just exploded. So it was an opportunity for me to post Instagram posts that I haven't been able to do for the last 4 days. There just wasn't enough signal. But one of the things that I have discovered, and if you're a Telstra user, and even if you're not, you would have seen ads on Instagram and also on TV talking about Telstra's ability to send satellite text messages. So I have been taking advantage of that. It doesn't always work. Sometimes if there's really, really poor signal, you don't have much of an option. And apparently they're using the Starlink setup, so you've just got to wait, and all of a sudden it'll be satellite SOS, which means that's all you can do. And then every so often it'll pop up saying SAT in bold white writing, and I can end up sending short messages. So I've done that a few times, but it doesn't always work. In dense, heavy forest, it's really just to emergency calls only. So that's been a handy little feature, which apparently Telstra is the only one that's got that at the moment. But when you're into remote areas and doing remote hiking, it's just an additional safety thing to be able to access family. Walked along Glenelg River for most of the day. There were a few times where I came in and into the bushland and back out again. And I think one of the things that was good about today is the limestone cliffs that I was facing were quite amazing. You know, we reached the biggest of these cliffs not long after I started this morning. And then by the end of it, as I was coming into Nelson itself, it was the cliffs are obviously narrowing down to being very short as the river approaches the ocean. The wildlife, nothing spectacular as such, just wallabies. And again, I had a large male black wallaby just sitting there, and I took a video of it and just kept on walking towards it, and I managed to get fairly close before it hopped away. So seems to be in Tasmania, in New South Wales, wallaby sees you, it's gone. Here they seem to be, okay, I'll see what happens and then I'll hop off. One thing, and I'll do a social media post on this at some point, hopefully some brains trust may have the answer to this. I've had a campsite, and I don't know whether this is a frog or a little native rodent or something. It sounds like the world's smallest barking dog. And I had one night where they were barking back at each other, but it sounded like a dog's bark, but it was just tiny. So if it is a little marsupial, it's one of the little ones. But if anyone knows, let me know. I ended up taking more breaks than I'd actually planned. By the time I got into Nelson, it was 4:01. Now, that was for a couple of reasons. So I asked Jill to check out a couple of accommodation options for me, and we ended up locking in Casuarina Cabins, which was pretty much one of the first ones into town. And it was one of these sort of things. And I could have chosen to camp. I passed the last campsite 2 metres from town. But I thought, I want a rest day. I need to be able to do the podcast, which means I need internet access. So I'm staying in one of these cabins, which will actually sleep 5 people, but certainly don't need that. But I've got a bathroom. I've got a queen-size bed. I've got a fridge. I managed to have a shower. I'm washing my clothes, so they'll get hung out to dry tomorrow. So I ended up staying at Casuarina Cabins. I've got a 5-berth cabin, which has got a small kitchenette, fridge, bathroom. So it was really nice to have a shower and get all the dirt off me. Queen-size bed. And I managed also to charge all my electronics. So even though I was carrying battery packs, 8 days roughly is about the limit of those. So there was no way without carrying a much bigger battery pack that I could have got through the entire trip. I did wash my clothes, and they will be clean smelling, but they won't necessarily be clean. Nothing like a washing machine to get all the dirt out, and just hand washing just doesn't do it. But they will dry tomorrow, which means won't smell as badly as I know, let alone anybody else knew when they came across me. So I'm just going through and doing this recording, and I've got a social media post to do. I've caught up with Instagram now, and I'll get all my social media posts, my Facebook posts up later tonight, and then I'll be back on track. I don't know what internet access is like on the southern portion of the trail, but I'm guessing that I will be able to only access internet for certain periods. So it'll be a bit of a bulk upload like I've just done now. So if you haven't had the chance, go through and look at the Instagram and the Facebook posts. They're all up and going. Instagram posts are more about how I'm feeling and what's going on as a highlight. The Facebook posts are in detail, and as they go on, I'm getting into the swing of things, and they're getting quite detailed. So it'll give you an indication of what's gone on rather than the highlight of Instagram. Once I got to Casuarina Cabins at 4:00, which was late, but I came across the owner who was waiting for a boat to come in at the wharf, and I said hello to him and probably ended up spending 25, 30 minutes talking to him, and then checked in, went down to the local service station. I wasn't necessarily feeling like a 1.1 kilometre walk there and back, but basically I wanted some hot food. I needed some cereal for the next couple of days and some milk so I can have some coffee and cereal. I'm being conscious about didn't buy lollies and things like that, although my treat of choice is always a wee spa and a 600ml bottle of Coke and or Pepsi. Given how hard a day I had a 1.25 litre bottle of Coke and 2 wee spas, which I managed to polish off, including some crab sticks as well. The food situation is a hard one. Nelson's one of those small country towns where it's only about 40 kilometres approximately to Mount Gambier and about 65 to Portland, where you've got big supermarkets. And it seems to be the locals travel in once a week to do a major shop for the week. But if you're a tourist and don't know what's available, it is pretty limited. So I did find out from Dave, the owner of Casuarina Cabins, that a lot of people will do food drops through the post. And in my instance, I had all my food in one hit. By the time we realised Jill wasn't going and we couldn't split the food, basically I ended up carrying a fair amount of food. So I've been dropping off roughly 550 grams a day. So at the moment, my pack has exploded in the accommodation, and tomorrow's job is doing the podcast, as I mentioned, and also repacking and getting myself all sorted out for my upcoming start, not tomorrow, the next day. So in the last recording for this podcast, it's day 8 of my trip, and I'm here in my cabin at Casuarina Cabins in Nelson. I've spent much of the morning doing social media and playing catch-up. Really, that started yesterday afternoon, but there was quite a lot that I managed to write but not actually post due to the lack of internet. In addition, I went through my food. I'm making a slight change to my itinerary. There is an option to go inland as opposed to going along the beach, and what that ends up doing is adding an extra day. Now, initially, I'd taken care of that by combining 2 sections to be just on 30 kilometres, and that would have kept me the same regardless of which way I went. I found with the heat and with everything else, I'm thinking it's probably going to be pushing it to get that sort of distance in one day. I may be able to do it, but if I don't, it means I'm going to have to stop and camp midway through, and then water's going to become an issue as well. So to play it on the safe side, I'm doing the stock standard trip, which is the 250 kilometre trip rather than the 262 kilometre. That's ignoring the diversions that I've done along the way. So I've had to magic up an extra day of food, which was not a problem. I had that much food left over. And in fact, this morning I've estimated probably about 1.5 kilos worth of food, mainly salted macadamias and the licorice. The coin licorice that I eat, which I've loved for years, I just can't seem to stomach it anymore. So I'll throw most of the stuff away, but the coin licorice is still in bags unopened, so I'll leave it here, and if someone wants it, they can have it. Otherwise, just throw it out. So as of this podcast being released, which is on Sunday night, I will actually end up starting walking on the second half of this trip on the coastal region of the Great Southwest Walk. And it's around about, it almost is a straight split. And the last day into Portland is around about 20 kilometres, and that'll get me into Portland next Saturday. And then I've got Saturday night in Portland, Sunday night in Portland, and then I'm getting the public transport back to Canberra. One thing worthwhile knowing is the weather is going to vary. For the first half of the week, it's relatively mild, and the last 2 or 3 days it's 25, 27 degrees again. So not looking forward to that, but it is what it is. We originally were going to do this walk in late March, and I pushed it off a month just so we could get some cooler weather, and I'm glad we did. Wouldn't mind just a slightly cooler again. For me, my personal choice is around about 12 to 15 degrees. That's comfortable. I can always get warm if I need to. Getting cool is a hard thing. The next podcast will be released in approximately Tuesday week. So I think that's around about the 5th of May. Normally I release every second Tuesday night or every Tuesday night, depending on the schedule. So that means I'll be back in Canberra, back at my desk and having all my bits and pieces make things much easier. And followed by the final episode, which is expectations versus reality, where I talked about what I expected of this trip before I'd actually been, to what I know about the trip now from really being there, and what suggestions I would make. And there are a few. That's all for this podcast episode, week 1 on the Great Southwest Walk Trip, brought to you by One Planet. We hope you've enjoyed. Bye for now.